COVID-19, why you do this to me? I really don't like being stuck in quarantine. I have no toilet paper, I don't even have a snack. Hey, coronavirus, I want my life back.
All right, it's a good-looking day, isn't it, out there right now? It just doesn't feel all that great. It is coolish, so we're not missing gorgeous weather by being isolated. Hello, fellow isolators. How are you all doing on this fine Wednesday? Yes, I'm going to keep reminding. I think that's my public service to you, is to tell you about when it is, what day it is. We are coming to you live this evening, and we are going to be talking about something that is happening. A phenomenon is happening in isolation. And it's not just happening to you. If you think it's just you, it's not. In fact, there's a name for it. It's called Q15. It's the quarantine 15, if you will. And it is essentially what is being given, the title being given to the weight that we seem to be gaining by our anxiety eating and eating good home cooking. The reason they call it Q15 or Quarantine 15, it's the same as the freshman 15, the 15 pounds that people say that students put on when they go away to university or college. Now, a lot of people are trying to take this time to sort of change themselves. And so why not change yourself as far as not only getting rid of the Q15, but doing it in a healthy way? And a lot of you have been talking about intermittent fasting. And we have the expert, the guy to go to. He is the author of these 3 books, the Obesity Code, the Complete Guide to Fasting, and the Diabetes Code. And Dr. Jason Fung joins us right now this evening. Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
I am doing quite well. What about this Q15? Are you being impacted by the Q15?
Yeah, it's a real phenomenon. I mean, the problem is, of course, there's really literally nothing else to do but eat. I mean, if you look at what people did for fun, like there's all kinds of things. You went to a concert, watched a show, watched Raptors basketball, right? We're in the middle of a huge playoff run this time last year, watched the Leafs. So there's all these things that people enjoy doing, and it's been sort of taken away. So really one of the last few pleasures we have is eating, and unfortunately that's what we're taking advantage of at this time. I mean, even getting together with family, getting together with friends, like you can Zoom and all that, but it's not the same as when you get together and have a great long weekend barbecue or whatever. So it's understandable, and this is unfortunately the time we're in. But there'll come a time that will happen all again. But again, it's a real thing. I see it all the time. People are just not able to do anything else.
And as I had said, a lot of people are trying to. Well, if we're going to be stuck here, we may as well do something to improve our lives. So if we can exercise or work out or just eat better, then this is a perfect time to do it. And intermittent fasting is something that is taking the world by storm. But this is not some fad diet, such as the Bernstein diet or South Beach diet, anything like this. This is actually something that is extremely healthy for you and is based on scientific fact. In fact, you are, and I didn't know what this meant until I was looking up a little bit about your bio. You're a nephrologist. Did I say it right?
That's right. I'm a kidney specialist.
A kidney specialist. And the kidneys play a vital role in insulin in our bodies.
Yeah, so one of the things that causes a lot of kidney disease, the biggest cause of kidney disease sort of by far, is type 2 diabetes. And the thing about type 2 diabetes is that we know that if you lose weight, then very often the type 2 diabetes will go away. And that's where I really became interested in how to get people to lose weight. And it's very interesting because, 5 or 6 or 7 years ago when I really started to get very interested in this question, I looked through the scientific literature and I felt that a lot of the things that we were being taught, like I was being taught as a doctor and dietitians and all that about what causes weight gain, what causes weight loss, I just didn't feel they were very accurate. And that's why I wound up talking a lot about it and also talking about it in the book, The Obesity Code.
Yeah.
And that's when I really started to think about intermittent fasting, because it's like, here's this strategy that seems like a terrible idea at first. So 6 years ago or so, when I started to implement this, everybody thought it was a bad idea. Everybody sort of knew that it was sort of horrible for the body to be doing this. And then I thought, well, why is that really? Because as a doctor, I actually tell people to fast all the time. So if you need to go for surgery, if you need to go, after surgery, if you need to go for a colonoscopy, you can't eat for 24 hours. So some places make you go for 48 hours. So in fact, people can fast, and I regularly fast people. If you do fasting blood work, you have to fast. So they fast all the time, and nothing really bad happens. And so that's why I thought, well, this might be a very good strategy to use.
So what does the fasting do? Bottom line, and you speak a lot about insulin, and I always thought it was only people who have diabetes that have to even be concerned about insulin. So what is it doing?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So if you're thinking about weight loss and weight gain, the key hormone is insulin. And insulin is a normal hormone. So remember, this is what happens when you eat foods, and it depends on what you eat. So different foods will stimulate insulin to a different degree. But when you eat, generally, your insulin goes up. And that is the signal for your body to start storing those calories as body fat, because that is really the whole point of body fat. It's a store of calories. So when you're eating food, there's more energy there, more calories there than you can use during your 20 minutes that you're eating. So your body needs to store that away. So that's what the signal is. When insulin goes up, you store some of that. You can store your, these calories as sugar, or you can store it as fat. When you don't eat, and remember, any time that you're not eating is fasting. So fasting is simply not eating. Insulin starts to fall. And as insulin starts to fall, that's your signal to switch away from this storage of calories and burning calories. Because now, if you're sleeping, for example, so you sleep 8 hours plus, a few hours on the either side that you're not eating, well, where's your energy going to come from? You have to take some of those calories that you've stored away and bring it back out. So that's the signal, is like the falling insulin is your signal to burn those calories. So your body really only exists in one of two states. It's either in the fed state, where it's storing calories, or it's in the fasted state, where you're burning calories. And the point is that if you're eating all the time, you're keeping your insulin high, so you're keeping your body in a state where it wants to store those calories. So what's the solution? Well, don't eat for a long period of time.
You're forcing it to take from its sugar supply.
You're simply switching it from using the calories from food to using the calories of your body fat. That is literally the reason we carry body fat. So you're not doing something sort of unphysiologic or harmful or unhealthy. You're using the body fat for exactly what it was there for. And remember, that's the reason you don't die in your sleep every single night. It's because we have this ability to hold those calories for a future date. The problem is we have so much that it's making us sick. It's giving us type 2 diabetes. So the solution is simply to let your body use it. And as you mentioned right off the bat, it's not some kind of fad diet, because people say, oh, it's so fattish, so fattish. Well, it's been used for thousands of years. I mean, honestly, around Lent, people fast. Around Ramadan, people fast. Yom Kippur, people fast. So there's so many times. So that literally it's in the Bible. It's been used for 2,000.
Yeah.
It's literally the oldest dietary intervention that exists.
So there are a number of different ways to, so it's not just a matter of fasting And let's get into it right now because Charity is asking, so eat breakfast, skip lunch, then have a healthy dinner, question mark. So we're going to get into that right now, Charity. We are going to talk about, first of all, the different kinds of fasting. So there's a number of different types of fasting. So let's go through them. I'm going to bring them up on the screen. We have the 16-8, the 24, the 24-hour, the 5-2, and the alternate. So let's start with the 16-8. What is that?
Yeah. So the diets, the fast vary based on two things. One is how long you're going to fast for, and two is what is allowed during the fast. So we'll go through them one at a time. But before we get to the 16-8, let's just back up a little bit and let's go back to sort of the way that people ate in the 70s. Because remember, this is a time, and I grew up in the 70s, where there's really very little obesity. And yet people are eating white bread. They're eating, jam. They're eating Oreo cookies. There's just not a lot of obesity. And people weren't watching their diet, and people were not exercising. So what's the point? The point is that people, the way that they ate is very different, not only in the foods that they ate, but their meal timing. So what people did in the 70s is they ate breakfast at, say, 8 o'clock, and they ate dinner at, say, 6 o'clock. So they tended to have an early dinner because the mother usually didn't work. So you ate at 6. So that's actually a 14-hour fast, right, from 6 o'clock p.m. to 8 a.m. that everybody practically in North America had without even thinking about it. So people think fasting is some kind of dirty word, but it's actually part of a normal cycle. You feed, then you fast. And having this 14-hour fast allows you to use up all the calories that you put in during the day. And if you grew up in the 70s and you're a naughty boy like I was, then you'd get sent to your bed without dinner. So you're talking about a 20-hour fast. Like if you were to tell people, oh, I fasted my kid 20 hours, they'd report you to the child care, right? But that happened to virtually every naughty boy, in North America in the 70s. And guess what? We all did fine. We all lived. Nobody had anything. We even learned our lesson, right? So that's a 14-hour fast. So the point is that if you want to now not just be neutral in your weight, so by doing that, you're allowing your body to have a certain period of time to store calories and a certain period of time to use the calories. You keep those in balance, they're actually doing pretty good. Now, if you want to lose weight, then you simply extend the time. So what you do is you go to a 16-hour fast. So that's an 8-hour eating window. So out of the 24 hours of the day, you would eat for 8 and fast for 16. And that's the 16-8 schedule, which is a very popular schedule and very easy to do. So if you don't eat breakfast, for example, and you eat at lunch, that at 11, and you eat until, say, 7 p.m., that's your 8-hour eating window. And you simply don't eat outside of that eating window. And that's, not too hard to do and you can do that most days of the week, and it doesn't impact your life particularly. So that's a very popular schedule. And it's been used by a lot of Hollywood celebrities and so on who have espoused it, Hugh Jackman and some of these other people who have used it to very good effect.
Okay.
You can...
So, Sorry, I just before the comment disappears, you can go back up to Lori. It's up. It was up a bit. It was about keep going. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Up, Lori. Yeah. Right there. That one right in the middle. Because nope, you just missed. You just skipped by it. Sorry, everybody. There, the Lori Lamson. Where she here? No, let me see if I can. There we go. All right, Lori put something on Facebook just now, and she's right. Breakfast, and she's actually spelled it break fast, and it's something that speaks direct. Like we use the word every day. We're going to have a break in the fast.
That's exactly where the term came from, right? But you can't break your fast if you're not fasting, which is the exact point that we're trying to make, is that this is not some kind of horrible thing we're doing to ourselves. It's part of that natural cycle. So you fast and you break your fast. And in French, it's the same thing. So if you look at the verb jeûner, it's the verb to fast. So déjeuner, or petit déjeuner is French, it's also to break your fast. So even way back, it's embedded right in the English and French language that, hey, this is not something bad for you. This is just something that happens every single day. Essentially what we're saying is you should not be putting muffins in your mouth every single minute of the day. That is not healthy for you.
Okay, folks, I know there's so many questions, so many great questions too, and we're going to get into the questions in a little, the questions about what's good for who in a little bit. But I still want to talk about the different kinds of fast. So we talked about the which one? We did the 16-8.
16.
So the 20 and 4. So you have meals in 4 hours, fast for 20 hours.
Yeah, so once you get to 16, you can actually, if you want to lose weight, you can simply extend that fasting window. You can go to 20 hours in a 4-hour eating window, for example, or you can go to what's sometimes called the 1 meal a day strategy, which is a 23 or 24-hour fast, which means that you simply eat dinner, for example, and then you go right until the next day's dinner. So you don't eat anything. And remember, during that period of time that you're not eating, you're simply taking the calories that you need from your body fat, because what you've done is you've changed the hormonal situation in your body, which is you've allowed insulin to drop so that you now have access to those fat stores. If you simply eat the same number of calories, and so a lot of people ask this, what if I eat the same number of calories spread throughout the entire day? Well, yes, you could do that. So the calories are going to be the exact same as that one sort of large meal. But because you've kept your insulin levels high, you don't have access to those fat stores. That is, remember, the insulin is what switches you back and forth. If you keep your insulin high, you simply cannot access those fat stores. In technical terms, we say insulin inhibits lipolysis, which is insulin inhibits the breaking down of those fat stores. Because remember, insulin is telling your body, store it, not break it down. So there's a huge difference from a hormonal standpoint if you take one large meal where your insulin's going to spike up and then drop and then go very low, versus sort of a little bit of calories all the time. And in fact, what's most physiologic for us is that sort of peak and fall. You look at lions and tigers and bears and so on. They have one large meal and then they don't eat for a long time. Snakes and so on. They'll have that one giant meal and then they'll sleep. Bears will eat all that salmon and stuff in the fall and then they'll sleep for 6 months or something like that. So it's something that we have the ability. That's our innate ability. This is the reason we store fat. So let's use it for the purpose it was there for.
Okay, I want to get a few questions right now. Let's start with this. The first question over here. There we go. Okay, this is I'm watching just to see Fung COVID hair. Okay, yeah. Okay, I think that's a fair comment and a fair question, sir. Can you tell me about your COVID hair?
Yeah, I haven't cut it in a long time, unfortunately. So I usually keep it
that's
nice
why I'm wearing a hat.
trim.
Okay, that's exactly why I'm wearing a hat. We're all in the same boat. Okay, let's get to our first serious question right now. With a 23-hour fast every day, then eating so to be satiated, I guess, how do you say that? Satiety or
Satiety. Yeah.
Satiety. How do I avoid metabolic adaptation? Now, this person obviously has an idea of what they're talking about. I don't.
So the question is about this sort of 1 meal a day strategy, or this 23, 24-hour a day strategy. And some people do it very successfully and attain the weight that they want. But sometimes what happens is that when you're doing this 1 meal a day, so they also call it OMAD, O-M-A-D. This OMAD strategy, they sort of plateau at a higher level than they'd like to. And that sometimes happens because your body is always adapting. So when it gets used to it, then you have to change it up a little bit. It does bring up a good question, though, about hunger. That is one of probably the main concerns that people have, is that, oh my God, if I don't eat, I'm going to be so hungry that I'm going to be forced to put, Krispy Kreme donuts into my mouth. And that's actually sort of a myth. So what happens during fasting, and we have lots of studies to show this, is that when you don't eat, you are hungry. There's nothing you can do about that. But when you don't eat, say you are supposed to eat lunch, when you decide that you're too busy, you skip lunch, so you're hungry at 1:30. what happens is that the hunger actually settles down. So it's like a wave. It just passes. So when they do studies of 24-hour fasting, what they see is that hunger peaks at sort of 3 periods, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And if you don't eat, say, breakfast and then you don't eat lunch, your level of hunger after 2 or 3 hours actually just goes right down to baseline. So your level of hunger is actually the same whether you ate lunch or you didn't eat lunch. It's actually roughly the same. It's very interesting, and we've all experienced
I've experienced that. I know that. Yeah.
It's very interesting because at 4 o'clock, 4:30, and because I fast sort of all the time, I'm sometimes like, did I eat lunch or did I not eat lunch? I actually can't remember because my level of hunger is the same. And the reason is this switching. That is, your body has now taken the calories it's needed from your sugar or your fat that you've stored away. And therefore, since you've eaten a meal of your own fat or sugar, then why would you be hungry, right? Everybody thinks that hunger is a state of not having food in your stomach, but it's actually not. It's a hormonal state. That is, if you think about the circadian rhythm, which is when are people most hungry and least hungry, they're least hungry at 8 a.m. and most hungry at 8 p.m. That's just the natural sort of average. Well, 8 a.m. is the period of time that you've had the longest period of time that you haven't eaten. Right?
Yeah.
You haven't eaten for like 10, 12 hours, and yet you're the least hungry. And 8 p.m. is a time when you just ate a few hours ago. So it's actually not. It's the hormonal satiety signaling that's really important. And trying to switch, and what fasting does is it actually switches you into using your own food so that you're actually, you fill yourself up from your own food, which is great. That's perfect. That's what we wanted to do. And that's why fasting is so much more advantageous, is because you're not creating this hunger. This whole strategy, I have to say, of eating like 10 times a day just strikes me as so stupid.
I've had a lot of people commenting about that. They say, I'm being told to eat 2, 3, 4 times a day.
But think about it this way. So think about it this way. What is an appetizer? An appetizer is a small portion of food that you eat to make yourself more hungry. Okay, that's what it is. And we know it works. So if you are eating small portions of food throughout the day, you're basically eating an appetizer, you're stimulating hunger, and then deliberately trying to stop yourself from eating again. And you're not going to do this 3 times a day. You're going to do this 6, 7, 8, 9 times a day. So you're not controlling hunger. You're making it worse, right?
Wow.
Because once you start eating, you want to eat until you're full. That's the natural way you're supposed to eat, right? It's just like if you have to pee. Once you start going, you got to go, right? You don't want to stop and start. That's really, really hard. And it's the same thing with our appetite. Why would you stimulate your appetite, stop it? Then 2 hours later, stimulate your appetite, then stop it. That takes an enormous amount of willpower.
Never thought about that. Okay, let's go to another question here. If a type 2 diabetic can keep their blood glucose in the normal range with diet and exercise, are they still diabetic? In other words, can diabetes be reversed?
So there's 2 types of diabetes. So type 1 is not reversible with diet. It's not a dietary disease. That's the one we think of more in children. Type 2 diabetes, which is about 90 to 95% of all diabetes, is the one we think about with adults, and the one that's associated with being overweight. And that one is absolutely reversible. So essentially the disease is very simple to think about. It's essentially too much sugar in your body, both fructose and glucose. So if your body has too much sugar, say you think of it as a sugar bowl. So you're pouring sugar into your body, at some point it's going to get full, it's going to spill out into the blood. That's diabetes. So if it's too much sugar in the body, then if you take out that sugar, it's not going to spill anymore. And therefore, your blood sugar is going to go down and your diabetes will be reversed. It's not to say that it will forever never come back, because if you simply fill up that sugar bowl again, it will spill over again. But the point is very powerful, because if you know that it's simply a matter of too much sugar, there's only 2 things you need to do to reverse that type 2 diabetes, which is 1, don't keep putting sugar in your body, and 2, simply let your body burn it off. Because if you don't eat, such as fasting, your body is going to burn off that sugar. But it's 100% natural.
Now, Paula is asking an interesting question here, and she's asking a question similar to what a lot of other people are asking with different ailments and different diagnoses. So why would my liver specialist tell me to eat 6 to 8 small meals a day? I'm a chronically diseased liver patient. So we get into the variables now. I've had transplant patients. I've had other people being told this is intermittent fasting, and fasting is not for everyone.
No, it's not for everybody. So you have to understand that, first of all, fasting is it's a continuum. So it's not like, the way that they used to do fasting is sort of in the 60s. The studies of fasting were like 30 to 60 days. That was fasting. We're not talking about that anymore. Nobody does these super long fasts anymore. But fasting is as little as 14 hours. So literally everybody was doing this in the 1970s every single day without trouble. So yes, 14 hours is perfectly doable. We know it from the experience of millions of people throughout the 1970s. As you get into longer fasts, you have to choose your spots. That is, if you are in a situation where nutrition is very important, such as with children, pregnancy, breastfeeding, or you're malnourished, or you're underweight, say anorexia nervosa, then yes, those are people that you probably don't want to be fasting. But if you're on the other side of the scale, that is you're overweight, you have too much fat, you have type 2 diabetes, you have too much sugar, then that's something that will be highly beneficial for you because you're simply allowing your body to burn it off. And you're doing it naturally without drugs, without surgery, that kind of thing. The only thing you're using is your body's own innate ability to use up that stored fat. Like, to me, it's strange that people would tell you this advice. I mean, if you think about it, like say you have a wood burning stove and, up in cottage country, people, they have all this wood, right? So when it gets cold, they throw this wood in the fire. Like, that's what you're storing it for. You got to use it, right? Otherwise, you're just going to, if you keep putting wood in the shed, it's just going to fill up, right? So it's the same. You keep putting fat on, like, why don't you use it, right? That's the whole point. And yes, for certain conditions, you want to be careful with long fasts, like 24 hours or longer, but 14 hours, 16 hours, and really almost any adult can do it without a problem.
Okay, let's get to another question here, and this is an interesting question. Does intermittent fasting method versus other weight loss help with eliminating the loose skin that is associated with drastic weight loss?
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting question because we've seen it many, many times. So we've been doing it for years. So I started doing it probably 7 or 8 years ago in my clinic, and now we have an online program called thefastingmethod.com where we help people with fasting, basically as a fasting support. So there have been thousands of people who have gone through. And what's really interesting is that out of the thousands of patients that we've treated, we actually never sent a single person for skin removal surgery. And if you ever watch those shows on TLC and so on, you know that a lot of people who lose weight, they get this sort of flappy skin. And the reason is with the fasting, you go through a period of time during fasting when you're breaking down protein. So this is called gluconeogenesis, where your body is switching over from sort of glucose metabolism to fat metabolism. There's a short period of time where it's actually burning some protein to generate glucose. And everybody thinks this is a really bad thing. But you have to understand that protein is not the same thing as muscle. So skin, connective tissue, that's all excess protein that the body is going to use up in order to generate energy. So because we're getting people into the 16, 18, 20, 24-hour period, they're noticing that they're having a lot less problems with this excess skin because I think that the body has burned it all off. Because you have to remember, like if you look back at pictures of prisoners of war and concentration camp victims, right, they've lost a lot of weight, but none of them have excess skin because the body's not going to carry excess skin if it doesn't have to. But it's the way that you lose the weight. If you simply do this thing where you eat all the time, keep your insulin up, you never get into that period of time where your body's going to metabolize this excess protein. So not necessarily muscle. If you have excess protein, then you're going to use it. So the average person who's overweight is estimated to have about 20 to 50% more protein than a normal weight person.
Okay. All right. We're going to take a quick break. I want to remind people of the web address where they can get in touch with you and find out more. It's called thefastingmethod.com. And your clinic is very successful. My gosh, you have like a fan club. I'm watching the comments come off the side here. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, fasting, some people think can be quite difficult, but you have 5 tips that will make fasting easier, and we're going to talk about that when we come back right after this on Kevin's Isolators.
COVID-19 is a serious health threat, but Canadians have always overcome our biggest challenges by looking out for each other and all doing our part.
Even if you don't have symptoms, you can spread COVID-19 to others and put lives at risk. So stay home. Your actions can be the difference between life and death.
New advice is posted daily on canada.ca/coronavirus. Check regularly and follow instructions. Stay home, save lives.
A message from the Government of Canada.
Be the hero the world needs right now. Wash your hands.
Tomorrow on the Isolators, Shauna Parr is a life coach, and she is going to be here saying you need to take advantage of this time in isolation and turn things around if you want to. Don't just talk about it. Do it. So we're going to be talking about that tomorrow. My guest this evening is Dr. Jason Fung, very well known for the books he has written on diabetes, insulin, as well as intermittent fasting. And we've talked about how tough it can be, or some people are saying, oh, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could do that. In fact, right now I'm thinking I'm hungry. I haven't had supper yet myself. So you have 5 tips that will help people along with that. So let's get to those tips. Hold on one second here. There we go. Okay, found them. All right, so let's start with number 1. Stay busy.
Yeah, this is hard during this period of time. But generally, if you're busy doing something else, you're simply not able to focus on eating. And this is the sort of normal thing that people, when they're working, when you're in school, for example, and you have big exams and stuff, you sort of naturally just work right through lunch or work right through dinner even. And, you know, the reason a lot of doctors, once they hear about the fasting, they actually understand immediately. They're like, yeah, I used to do that all during residency. I just didn't have time. I was busy in the OR all day. I was busy in Emerge all day. So if you stay busy, the time just flies, and you don't even have time to think about whether you're hungry, whether you ate, whether you didn't eat. And the key is that it actually gives you time back, because, you know, we're all so busy in our lives usually that, hey, having an extra 40 minutes is you know, really useful. I mean, that's the reason I didn't eat breakfast for many years. I mean, it wasn't that I was trying to lose weight or anything. It was just that I would be tired and I wanted to sleep. So I'd roll out of bed, and 5 minutes later I was in the hospital. And I'd rather sleep than take half an hour to make myself breakfast and then eat it and clean up and then go in. I'd rather sleep every day. I'd get an extra 30, 40 minutes from that. And to me, that was more valuable. So that's where it sort of started. And it doesn't take time. It actually gives you back time. Yeah. So
and I've noticed myself. I mean, if I'm busy, you know, I'll have a breakfast, then I'll go out and let's say you're working on some project or doing something and you're busy. Before you know it, it's supper time. And you haven't been hungry all day. However, if I'm just sitting down reading a book or watching TV, I'm up 2 or 3 times to get a snack or make my lunch.
Yeah, I notice that particularly when you're doing gardening or home improvements, like we've all done this, right? Like you get out in the yard and you're planting, it's busy. And it's like, you know, if somebody didn't tell you it was dinner time, you would have worked right through because, you know, the light is good and you want to get, you know, the grass seed down and all that sort of stuff. And I notice it when I do any kind of, you know, home improvement, like painting the house, like again, you're just so busy. You're just doing stuff. And remember, the body doesn't need for you to eat. The body will take the calories it needs from your body fat. And, you know, sometimes if there's a big rush on, you know, you want to get stuff in before it starts raining or something, then, you know, I just work right through.
All right. Don't binge is the next one, because I guess you're thinking when you see 16:8, okay, I'm not going to eat for 16 hours, but I'll tell you, at 16 hours and 1 minute, I am having everything in that fridge.
Yeah, that happens to all of us. So it's a natural tendency, but it actually is counterproductive because the point is that when you're fasting, you want to be taking those calories from your sort of body fat stores. So if you eat a lot afterwards, well, you're going to store it. So of course, it's going to slow things down. And the truth is that for people who fast, there's always this tendency to overeat. But anybody who's done it knows that when you overeat, you wind up getting this big stomach ache. And it really quickly tells you that, hey, you really shouldn't be doing that. So there's several ways to get around that. One is simply to try to eat as normally as possible. So forget about the fact that you even fasted and try to eat as normal a meal as possible. And, just try and stay on your schedule. So that's the other thing, of course, that is often sometimes useful is for longer fasts especially, is to break it sort of gently. That is, plan to eat a little bit, like a small salad or something, like half an hour before you eat your sort of main meal, so that you're not sort of this really ravenous. But most people actually don't, after a few weeks, they don't notice it because the hunger actually starts to go down. So a lot of people, they wind up coming back to me and saying, you know what, I think my stomach shrank because I just can't eat and I'm full. And I'm like, that's great, because now you're working with your body to lose weight. You're controlling what's really important, which is the hunger signaling. I mean, people talk about calories, but it's like, why are you eating more calories? That's the real question. And the answer is that you're being hungry all the time. So if you can control that hunger, that's when you can see the weight loss.
And that leads us to the next tip, and that is give it time.
Yeah. So just like anything, when you do something new, it takes time for your body to get used to it. So what you're doing, of course, is trying to break a lot of old habits and try and get your body to use body fat for energy, which is something that many people haven't done. And so therefore, it's going to be strange. They're going to have the hunger. They're going to have all these problems. So yes, is it going to be tough? Yes, it will be tough for about 2 to 3 weeks. And if you know that going in, then you can sort of prepare for it. It's just like if you decide to start running, you don't go out and run a marathon right away. You're going to be sore. And then if you're sore, you'll say, oh, wow, this running, it's really terrible for your body. It's like, no, you just didn't prepare properly. You have to build up to it. So it's very much like a muscle. Fasting, you want to build up to it and then give it time so that your body can get used to it. And then after a while, it's very simple.
You're telling people as well to be careful who you tell you're doing this.
Yeah, this was probably more important 6 years ago when everybody thought it was like the craziest, stupidest thing that people had ever heard of. There were a lot of people very well-intentioned people who would say, well, you're going to go into starvation mode, you're going to burn muscle, you're going to be so hungry, you're going to be forced to eat and all this sort of stuff. None of it is true, by the way. You don't go into starvation mode. In fact, your body actually maintains its caloric expenditures better than standard diets. You don't burn muscle. It actually is better than standard diets. So all these sort of half-truths about fasting. So very well-intentioned people. I mean, people used to go to their doctors and doctors would scream at them for doing fasting, even while they had lost weight and gotten off all their diabetic medications. They'd be like, oh, you're going to kill yourself and so on. So you really want to make sure that, you know what you're doing. So make sure you do, talk to your doctor and make sure you've got the knowledge you need to be successful. But if you know somebody's just going to give you a hard time, even though they may be very well-intentioned, then maybe just do it quietly. And you don't have to do sort of like 40 days and 40 nights all at once. You can start with 14 hours, then go to 16 hours.
And people are getting different messages. Pauline's comment is on the screen right now. Fasting is still taboo because many doctors still don't know what they're talking about. So frustrating and I find that with mental health and anything. I find that we're still in the medical community, there isn't a single message that can be agreed upon that people are hearing. And so you'll say one thing, but then somebody's doctor says, oh, no, you should be eating four or five meals a day.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's useful to sort of go back, and see what has stood the test of time. That is, if we go back and say, okay, well, in the 70s, people had a 14-hour fast. Can we go back to that? Because if you look at studies, what they show is that people on average are eating for 10 hours 10, 14 hours of the day and having much shorter periods. So they start eating sort of as soon as they get up, and they don't stop eating till they go to bed. So 6, 7, 8 hour times a day. So the point is that if you look back in the 70s, hey, they had 14-hour fasting, no problem. And then you look back and you say, hey, if fasting was so bad, why is it in the Bible? Why have people been doing it every year for the last 2,000 years? Like Ramadan, it's like that's a period of fasting. Like literally billions of people do it.
And it's like exercising. We never exercised until the 50s.
Yeah.
So why, how did we survive for 2,000 years with that? We'll get to the last point, then I want to get a couple of questions, then I'm going to let you go. And that is, fit it in to your life. Don't make your life fit it.
Exactly. And this is something that's so empowering about fasting, is that it's really flexible. That is, you could do whatever you want. So you can do 14 hours today and 24 hours tomorrow. You could do it for weeks at a time or not do it at all. So it's completely flexible, and it's completely up to you what you want to do. Day to day, or throughout the year, there may be periods of time like after the holidays where you actually want to do more fasting, and then periods of time like vacation where you don't want to do less fasting. You want to go out and enjoy yourself. You want to go out and eat and party and all that sort of stuff, and that's totally okay, because that's up to you. What you don't want to do is get so rigid that you say, well, I was supposed to go out with my friend, but I'm fasting, so I'm going to cancel. It's like, no, that's not the point. Yeah. The point is to sort of let it work for you. Like, you don't work for it. It works for you. So there'll always be a time that you can say, you know what? I'm not that hungry. I don't have to have breakfast. You know what? I'm not going out for lunch. I'm not meeting anybody. I don't have to have lunch. I'll just work right through and go home 45 minutes earlier. Today.
I don't know if there's an answer to this question. How do I know when I'm hungry? I right now I feel hungry, but am I hungry? How do we know when we're hungry?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we look at, you can measure certain hormones. So ghrelin is the hunger hormone. So when it goes up, people tend to feel hungry. And if you look at a regular person, it spikes 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So therefore, what's happened is that there's a very conditioned response. That is, you're used to eating 3 times a day, so you're going to get hungry 3 times a day. So it's really a matter of the hormones. And then on the flip side, there are satiety hormones. So certain hormones will tell your body that you're full. So we know some of these things like peptide YY and cholecystokinin and so on. So we can look at that sort of flux of hormones. So most people actually don't know what real hunger is, because we're in a period of time in history where, in North America anyway, that there's more the other problem, sort of obesity rather than starvation. But the whole point is that if you simply ignore it, it will go away. And by doing that, you can actually control your hunger. So that is, it's a conditioned response. So we eat 3 times a day, therefore we actually get hungry 3 times a day. If you stop eating 3 times a day, you will likely significantly diminish your hunger. So for instance, in breakfast time, so the average person will be hungry at breakfast because they eat breakfast every day for the last 40 years. I haven't eaten breakfast, really regularly for 30 years. So I actually don't get hungry barely at all in the morning. So you can actually use these things to sort of control it. So sure, for the first 2 weeks, you're still going to get that hunger, but then that ghrelin peak sort of stops going down. It's like Pavlov's dog, right? So they ring a bell, the dog starts salivating. For us, it's like, oh, noontime, we start salivating. But if you're used to sort of varying your meals and saying, well, that has no hold over me, that hunger signaling is going to go down.
Is there a best time to do the 16-hour fast? I think a lot of people try and fit it in so that after 6 p.m., they're not doing anything, not eating, because they're going to be sleeping most of that time. So is that just more convenient, or is there the best time of day to be fasting for 16 hours?
Yeah, if you're looking at weight loss, probably it's best to eat in the sort of early afternoon because there's the circadian rhythm to be, so during the morning, you're generally not hungry. So forcing yourself to eat when you're not hungry is not a great strategy. At nighttime, you're going to be more hungry, so you're going to tend to eat more. So therefore, eating late at night is also not a very good strategy because you're naturally going to eat more. So the best time to eat, sort of, if you're going to do this, is sort of in the midday, sort of, between 11 and 6 sort of thing, if you're going to do this sort of strategy, so moving it early. The problem is, of course, that it's very hard to fit that into a normal sort of Canadian or American lifestyle. That is, and I know this very well. If you do a 24-hour fast, it's very easy to skip breakfast. Almost nobody cares if you skip breakfast. You could get a coffee and that's it, right? You don't have to eat bacon and eggs, and nobody will care. Many times it doesn't matter if you skip lunch either. You just work through lunch and nobody cares particularly. But skipping dinner from a social standpoint is much more difficult. That's when we tend to go out. That's when we tend to have our family dinners and, so it's just very difficult to do a longer fast that go through that. Like you can do it, but it's not always easy to fit it in. And that's one of the things for, fitting it in makes it easy for you to do, because if it's going to make it hard, you're not going to do it. So yes, you should try and move your fasting period, to incorporate that sort of evening period if you can. But out of the two things, I would say fit it into your life first, because if it's really hard to skip dinner all the time, because that's when you connect with your spouse and your kids, then you don't necessarily want to do that.
So when we hear we should have 1,000 calories, someone just asked how many calories a day should we have? It was Donna who had asked that. We are told, what is it for a man or for a full-grown man is about 2,000 calories a day or 1,500 calories a day, roughly. Should we be observing a number of calories per day? Should we be eating less carbs, more protein? Like, is there things we should be doing to the type of diet we have as well as fasting?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that comes up all the time. So first, in terms of the calories, there is no specific need to eat a certain number of calories. So say in an average person, you eat 2,000 calories. That's just sort of a ballpark figure. So 2,000 calories, if you eat over a day, people say, well, if you only eat once in that day, should you eat the 2,000 calories? No, you don't need to. And sometimes it's hard to eat that much at one sitting. Because remember, the point is that if your body is burning 2,000 calories a day and you are fasting, so you eat one meal that day, and you eat 1,000 calories, you take 1,000 calories from your food and 1,000 calories from your body stores, and your body burns 2,000. Well, great, you're going to lose weight over time. So if you try and force yourself to eat 2,000 calories, like why would you do that? Because your body's simply going to store that all away. So you're just basically going to take back what's in storage. So there's actually there's no reason to sort of make sure you get a certain number of calories. In terms of foods, that's the diet. So just remembering that fasting has nothing to do with your diet. And that's one of the reasons it's powerful, because it can work with any diet. So whether you're vegetarian or paleo or keto or whatever diet you want to follow, fasting makes no recommendations on that. It only makes recommendations on the period of time that you're not eating. But if there's a proper diet, yes, there's sort of very easy rules. That is, try to avoid sugar. Sugar is really not good for you. And avoid processed foods. Try to eat foods in their natural state as much as possible, because remember, natural foods have natural satiety hormones. That is, if you take an apple, you can't just keep eating apples and apples and apples, because the fiber in the apple will fill up your stomach, it will activate stretch receptors, and it will tell you to please stop eating. So if you ever go to a Chinese buffet and you've eaten a lot of food, and then you say, oh, you want another pork chop? You're like, oh no, that's going to make me throw up, right? So those are powerful satiety signals, and your body has that. You have to listen to it. So all natural foods will contain these satiety signals. When you get to junk foods and processed foods, so if you're eating highly processed carbohydrates or something like that, what they've done is they've taken away all those satiety signals. So if you take, say, a sugary beverage, there's no fiber that makes you full, there's no fat that makes you full, there's no protein that makes you full. It's pure sugar. And therefore, you can drink as much as you want. You just won't get full. That's why when you're eat after a full meal and you're over full after the buffet, you can still drink a Coke. It's okay, because there's no satiety signaling. So eat natural foods, because they will tell you when to stop eating.
Arlene brings up a question as well that a lot of people do feel this way, and that is, but if you don't eat for a long period of time, doesn't your sugar levels, don't they spike?
Generally, they drop, and once in a while they will go up. And it's a very interesting thing because what happens during fasting, and people always say, well, if you're not eating, why would your blood sugar go up? And that is a phenomenon that we see because what happens is that insulin's dropping, but other hormones are going up. And remember, these other hormones are trying to pull the sort of sugar from the stores and push it out into the blood. Because your body can store sugar. It's called glycogen in the liver. So those hormones are now pushing sugar out into the blood, and sometimes they're a little over-exuberant, especially if you have a big fatty liver, if you're sort of overweight. It's a little over-exuberant. It pushes more glucose out into the blood. The point is that if you are fasting, and this happens sometimes, somebody fasts for 24 hours and they say, whoa, my blood sugar went up. It's like, okay, so where did that sugar come from? Because you didn't eat anything. Well, it came from your liver. It came from your body's own stores of sugar. It's simply moving it out from, before where you couldn't access it to a place where you could burn it in the blood.
Okay. You know what? I'm gonna wrap things up here. This time just absolutely flew, and I can see why you have a fan club. I want to remind people about your books, the Obesity Code, Guide to Fasting, the Diabetes Code, all available, I presume, Amazon, Indigo, et cetera, et cetera. Okay.
Absolutely. So they're all slightly different. So the Obesity Code talks mostly about weight loss and weight gain.
Oh, hold on one second. There, that's my fault. I turned your mic off. I apologize. So the Obesity Code, go through that again.
So the Obesity Code is talking mostly about what causes weight loss, weight gain. It's a science book. It's about how the body perceives these hormones and what makes it gain weight and what makes it lose weight, and how you're going to be able to, once you understand that, how you're going to be able to use that to lose weight successfully. The Complete Guide to Fasting is more a practical guide to how to do it and what the different styles are. And the Diabetes Code is a book about mostly type 2 diabetes and how it can be reversed using some of these strategies, particularly intermittent fasting, but also low carbohydrate diets and so on.
And they can get in touch with you through this web address. And hold on, we'll just bring that up. There we go. Hold on. All right. It is thefastingmethod.com. And I went to the site. There's a little quiz there that you can do about your eating habits, about your weight, things like that. What else can you offer at the clinic for people? Are people going there because they're diabetic? Are they going there because they want to lose weight, or all of the above?
All of the above. So the fastingmethod.com is a program that we developed based out of our years of clinical experience and sort of thousands of patients to sort of help people do it. Because the actual idea is very easy. Fasting, just don't eat. That's really all you need to know. But there's a lot. You need to, like, people, it's not fun. It's not easy. So having a supportive group, having the education, and being able to ask the questions, hey, what happens if I get headaches? Hey, what happens if I get constipated? Hey, what do you do if this? What do you do if that? And that's the point, is to give people that sort of information. 50 years ago, you just ask your mother, right? It's like she would know what to do. But now, because people don't fast, we need to provide that sort of education, that support, and that community where people are going to be able to connect with each other and help each other fast. Because some people, the stories on there are sometimes incredible. Like, I'm blown away sometimes. People are losing hundreds of pounds and they're getting off their medications, and it's like incredible.
All right, this is again has been absolutely fascinating. Dr. Jason Fung has been my guest, and you make sense. Like
Thanks.
That's the thing. It is quite interesting, and I think that what I find fascinating is all you're doing is telling us to listen to our body.
Yeah, it's basically all it is. It's actually really interesting because, when I talk about insulin and stuff, I give all the science, but then when it comes down to it, essentially it comes down to some very simple things. Like, one, some foods are more fattening than others, right? So if you eat foods that really stimulate insulin, like cookies, they're much more fattening than if you eat even an equal calorie portion of, broccoli. Nobody gets fat eating broccoli. It just doesn't happen. So that's the point. And it's like, okay, that makes sense. Or, you want to lose weight? Just don't eat all the time. That's really, really important. And it's like, okay, well, that sort of makes sense. Or if you have type 2 diabetes, it's like, well, if you don't eat, your body's going to use up that sugar, isn't it? It's a source of energy. So simply let it use it up, because that's natural. You're not putting drugs into your body. You're not doing surgery. Like, it doesn't make sense to do that. And people can do this themselves. So what I'm telling people is, after all the science, they come back and they say, hey, that's what my grandmother told me.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's like, maybe I shouldn't have been eating all those starchy foods and all those snacks and cookies. I'm like, yes, your grandmother was entirely correct. And she was probably the one who was not eating the bedtime snacks and, fasting on a regular basis because it was part of her sort of heritage. I always find it striking that everything I talk about always winds up going back, hey, if we just did it.
Yeah, if we'd done that like we did for the last 2,000 years, yeah.
Yeah, it's like crazy. It's like, it's crazy to think that, okay, we have this word fasting, which is embedded in our language, which is embedded in our religions, which we know we've been done for 2,000 years. And all of a sudden, hey, that's the worst thing you could do for your body. It's like, so how did we 2,000 years? And why is there word breakfast and déjeuner, and why is it in the Bible, and why is it in, Islamic tradition, and why is it in Jewish tradition? Like, how does this even make sense? Like, honestly, it's the worst thing we could do for our body? Really?
This has been fascinating. Dr. Jason Fung, thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Okay, you too.
All right, Dr. Jason Fung, thefastingmethod.com. Check out those books. Have you watched the comments? Have you watched the comments of people who are saying that he's changed lives? And it's just, they're doing a great job selling his books for him, even right here on the side. But this idea of making sense. We hear it time to time from the experts we've had on this show in our isolation time, is a lot of the nutritionists, those talking about cognitive behavior therapy, anything, they keep bringing us back to, hey, just make sense. So when it comes to to going on a diet, a lot of nutritionists remind us, you're not on a diet. You don't go on a diet. You don't participate in a diet. A diet is what you eat. It's everything. So, again, it's this idea that we need to listen to our bodies, and we talk about that with mental health a lot, right? Is when we feel, the problem we get into with anxiety attacks and panic attacks is we wait too long. We don't deal with the anxiety the moment we feel it, because we've stopped listening to our bodies. We've stopped listening to ourselves. So it's the same with fasting and with what foods we are eating. We stopped listening to ourselves. So do we really need those cookies? Do we really need this? Well, yes, we want them, but do we need them? You are, after all, what you eat. Tomorrow, we are going to be talking to a life coach. Shauna Parr will be here, and she is going to be talking about just doing it. If you're going to change your life, damn it, just do it. Stop talking about it. So we're going to do that tomorrow and hope that we can point you on the right road. Until then, thanks for joining us, and take care of yourself. Take care of each other.
COVID-19, why you do this to me? I really don't like being stuck in quarantine. I have no toilet paper, I don't even have a snack.